Hello, faithful listeners. It's Skelegun here. Welcome to the ossuary. Anyways, today I'm going to be talking about the 1980 Italian West German science fiction horror film Contamination, directed by Luigi Cosi. This is a film I have not seen before. I've only really heard of it. I watched a trailer for it. It's interesting to note that this is considered to be an Alien ripoff, but from the trailer I've seen, it looks more like an Aliens ripoff, which is interesting because it came out 5 or 6 years before Aliens did come out. Don't know too much about the movie other than it's about people finding alien eggs and they cause people to explode or something. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting watching this. What I'm going to expect out of this is amazing soundtrack because the music, if I understand correctly, was done by Goblin, who are always fantastic. Other than that, I'm expecting some really bad acting. I'm expecting some great, and by great I mean that sarcastically, some really cheesy exploding people scenes. From what I understand, also this film was considered one of the video nasties. So in Thatcher era England, it was banned because it was too graphic for the sensitive British audiences. It's probably going to look really bad. It's probably going to be just pretty standard story of they find the eggs, they send in a team of like soldiers, and one by one they all get killed, and then main character kind of in classic Italian film fashion, main character is probably going to be very useless and is probably going to somehow bumble his or her way through the movie and survive while all the competent characters get killed. And the ending is probably going to be like, oh, they think they won, but then one of the eggs survived or something, and it's probably just going to be a really generic movie. I'm watching this for free on Amazon Video because I have that service, and let's give it a whirl. The only notable actor in the movie is Ian McCulloch, who's a kind of a British character actor. He's been in a bunch of bad movies. I think he was in like an episode of Doctor Who, but I don't watch that. So it's not really. This isn't a very well known movie. It's known in like B movie circles, but it's an Italian horror movie from 1980. It's a rip-off movie. There's not really too much to expect out of it. So other than the Goblin soundtrack, if that is indeed who does the soundtrack, which I really should be doing more research before I do this, but I think that's part of the fun is not knowing a lot about the movie before you get into it. So anyways, I'm going to pause this now and I will watch Contamination, and I will see you all on the other side. Thank you. Hello, welcome back. I just finished watching Contamination, and I'll start off by saying I've noticed that some people, as I mentioned earlier, people compare this movie a lot to Alien, and I know I mentioned earlier that I suspected it would be more like Aliens than Alien. I would say that both me and those people were wrong. The people who said it was more like Alien are more correct than me who said it was like a. Well, they both theories have their merits, but this is a movie where I feel like I can kind of explain it, give away the whole story, and it won't really matter. It's not really something I would write home about. I wouldn't say like, oh, you definitely need to go see this. So I feel a little bit more comfortable spoiling the movie for those of you listening. So, for those of you, if you've been living under a rock and you've never seen Alien, the classic movie Alien begins with the Nostromo, a spaceship picking up a signal from a uninhabited planet. They go to investigate it, find an alien spaceship on the planet. Inside are some eggs. One of the crew members of the Nostromo leans in too close. The egg hatches. An alien parasite pops out of the egg, latches onto his face. They bring him back aboard. Um, like a couple days later or whatever, or hours later, the egg face hugger, as it's called, falls off. An alien bursts from his chest. A baby alien grows into an adult within the span of a couple of hours, and begins slowly, one by one, picking off the crew of Nostromo until only Ellen Ripley is left, played by Sigourney Weaver, and she blows up the ship and is on the escape craft, and the alien is still on the escape craft, and then she blows it out of the airlock, and she lives not so happily ever after, as you find out in the sequels. Which, by the way, there was only one sequel to Alien. The would be Aliens. Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection don't exist. I refuse to acknowledge them. Same thing with Alien vs. Predator and AVP 2. They're both garbage. All four of those movies, Alien 3 and Resurrection and AVP 1 and 2 are garbage. So anyways, that's the plot of Alien. The plot of this movie, Contamination, which people say is a ripoff of Alien, is there's a boat coming into New York. A helicopter flying by notices that there's seemingly no one aboard the boat. The boat's not answering any of its hails. So when the boat is docked, they send some, like a doctor and some crew aboard to quarantine the ship, find out what's going on. They get aboard. They find out that the crew all seem to have mysteriously exploded. Their chests have just exploded. There's meaty bits and chunks everywhere. It's a real horror scene. And they find these weird green objects within the cargo hold, within these boxes of coffee. Well, boxes marked coffee. So, being idiots, one of the investigating party decides to pick up one of these glowing egg objects that's humming. Of course, it explodes. The green goo goes over all except for one of the boarding party, and within seconds, the people hit by the goo, they all suffer the same explodey death as the crew did. So the surviving member of the crew is a New York policeman. He is brought into quarantine where he meets this lady scientist. Tony Arias is the name of the New York detective or policeman. The lady scientist colonel is Stella. Her character name is Stella Holmes. They're investigating these mysterious eggs. They look into where the eggs are going. They were going to a warehouse. When they go to raid the warehouse, the employees open fire on the police, or secret. Well, actually, it's like a secret government organization that was sent over there that Stella works for. And after a gunfight, they find the surviving members of the crew of the warehouse blow up one of the eggs, showering themselves with the goo, and they explode too. They seem to be mind-controlled, like pod people or something. And so they notice that all the boxes have the same name of the company. It's some company, I think it's called like So they figure that the best bet is to probably investigate this coffee company, which seems to be importing alien eggs. Now, this brings into the other main character, who is named Colonel Ian Hubbard, or Commander Ian Hubbard. He was an astronaut who went to Mars a few years ago. He was one of the 2 survivors of that expedition on Mars. He reported seeing alien eggs up there, but his fellow astronaut, Dr. Hamilton, or Commander Hamilton, or whatever, survived, and Hamilton died seeing alien eggs, and as a result, Mr. or Commander Hubbard was drummed out of the service and was kind of discharged, and he's been living as like a drunk for the last 2 years. He's just been miserable. So, also, Colonel Stella Holmes, the lady doctor, she was part of the team that interrogated the astronauts when they landed, and she was kind of instrumental in getting him expelled from the service, and now she has to return and kind of apologize and bring him back into the case because his descriptions and sketches he had made match identical to what was seen. Now this brings up the question, what happened to Hamilton? It was said that he died after his private plane crashed in Florida. Now, everyone knows if your private plane crashes, you're either doing an insurance fraud or you're running away to Brazil to start an alien farm. So, this is where the movie takes a completely different turn and becomes basically sort of like a James Bond movie almost, where the focus isn't on the focus becomes investigating this coffee company, which is actually run by Hamilton now, and he has this weird suit he wears because he's now a Bond villain, and really, though, he is just a pawn of this giant alien Cyclops plant thing that mind controls him and is using him to distribute the eggs across the world. So it's poorly explained. Let me get to that. So the life cycle of this plant alien thing makes 0 sense. It seems like the way it's described is that Hamilton brought an alien seed back from Mars with him. He snuck back and planted this seed somehow, and it grew into this alien cyclops, which lays eggs. These eggs don't produce like an alien itself. They don't produce like some kind of baby alien or anything. They just produce this bacterial slime that when it comes into contact with other life forms causes them to explode. I don't understand this life cycle. It's really stupid and doesn't make sense. Sorry, something just banged on the door and it freaked me out. Anyways, so the life cycle of this plant alien doesn't make any sense. It's silly, nonsensical, and it just ends up, the less you think about it, the better. Anyways, back to the story. So once they get into like Brazil or South America, I can't remember if it's ever specifically stated what country in South America they land. It becomes kind of like a James Bond movie where they get like assassins sent after them and there's sabotage, and then it leads to like a big shootout and daring rescue inside the coffee plantation, which is really an alien farm. And in the process, Tony, or I think his name was Tony Arias, the cop, he ends up getting eaten by the alien, and Hamilton ends up exploding, and only the lady scientist and astronaut guy survive. So they make it out. Everyone lives happily ever after, I guess. But then, oh no, there's an egg in New York City and it's gonna explode. And then, like, I assume that will just be the end of it because, like, it doesn't seem like there's a continuation of the life cycle after this. So, like, yeah, like, some people probably blow up, but, like, it's not gonna, like, continue the cycle because, I don't know. Anyways, so that's the plot to this movie. It doesn't really, I think, like, the reason people compare it to Alien is because it involves eggs and it has a strong female lead, and also there is one scene that is reminiscent of Aliens, or Alien, I should say, where the astronaut guy is giving his recount of what happened on Mars, and they see the mysterious cave, and they enter it, and they see a hallway full of, it's a cave, a tunnel full of eggs. That's kind of like the scene in Alien at the beginning where they find the spaceship full of eggs. That's about it as far as, like, Alien references or copycats go, but, like, I do notice that a lot of people seem to just say, like, write this movie off as an Alien ripoff. I wouldn't say it borrowed ideas from Alien, and I wouldn't call it a ripoff, though. It is still a kind of enjoyable movie. I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it. And out of the 4 movies I've reviewed thus far, at least I've done the audio reviews for, I would say this was easily the weakest of the 4. But it was also the most coherent of the 4, and most straightforward, so there's always that. And it did have some kind of cool ideas, I gotta say, like, it did do some stuff original, and the soundtrack was done by Goblin. The soundtrack, for those of you who don't know, Goblin or The Goblin is they were big in the 80s. This like prog rock band from like Italy. They did a lot of movie soundtracks. Every time they do anything, it just sounds amazing. And this movie has a fantastic soundtrack. So if you don't even want to watch the movie, just check out the soundtrack. It's every track is bangers. It's slapping, or whatever the kids say these days. I'm pretty sure there's a scene. I'm pretty sure in the scene where they walk into the cave and they find the alien eggs, that's like a flashback. There's like a shot where it's like pulled back and it's supposed to like look like this like big huge cave. I'm pretty sure they actually used real life green peas in place of eggs. Also, in the beginning, when the helicopter's flying over the ship, the cargo ship, and it's reporting that there's like no one on board visible, I'm pretty sure you can actually see 2 people on board the ship, which I thought was pretty funny. And there's also a scene when they show a picture of the photograph of the egg to Commander, what was his name again? Commander Hubbard, and he says like, oh yeah, ones I saw on Mars were green, just like in your photograph, even though the photograph they show him was in black and white. So there's, little mistakes in this movie. It's kind of not the best made movie, but it's also not the worst. One thing it does have going in its favor, I will say, is that like it actually had characters, and there was like some chemistry between the actors or the characters that was nice. I noticed in a lot of movies, a lot of Italian horror movies that I've seen, and really horror movies in general, that there's a trend to have characters that are just, you know, basically non-characters. They exist just to be people who get killed, and they have a tendency to just be completely forgettable. Inferno was a movie I really enjoyed, but I can't remember any of the characters' names. There was just like protagonist guy, and then girl who died, and then other girl who died, and then other girl who died. That was kind of like it for characters. This movie, like you kind of like Arius was kind of a fun sort of New York detective in over his head, and then there was like the stoic doctor lady, and there was like the sort of disgraced astronaut character. He was pretty interesting. He ended up kind of stealing the show, probably because he was like the most known actor out of the whole movie. He ended up becoming the main character, kind of, which is weird because he was introduced like halfway through the movie, and he ends up stealing the show. But other than that, it's kind of just a generic movie. It reminded me a bit of The Stuff or Halloween 3, which I'm not going to bother looking up the years those came out. They all came out kind of around the same time, I'm assuming. Late 70s, very early 80s, and they're both movies about an evil corporation that is secretly behind the scenes trying to kill everyone for some nefarious goal. In the case of The Stuff, it is also about aliens. So yeah, if you like movies about evil corporations, if you like movies about plants, Cyclops alien plant farms, you'd like this movie. If you like movies where the main character isn't introduced until halfway through the movie, you'll like this movie. If you like movies with amazing soundtracks that are otherwise very forgettable and generic, you'll like this movie. That's about all.